You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, Days of Our Lives fans. This is SoapDirt.com, and we have got your recap for the Monday, April 10th, 2023 episode. So much is happening today. There's a huge cameo you don't want to miss with John Capellos. If you don't know who that is, I'll tell you in just a minute. Plus, Steve is stunned to see Beau alive, and then a nasty brawl breaks out. Someone has a bad accident. Kayla's in tears over a love letter, and Doc helps Stephanie remember the call with her mom, plus a whole bunch of romance for Harris and Hope. Stay tuned. Let's dig into this recap. Real quick before we get started, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, show us the love, and let's dig into this Days of Our Lives recap today. First, we're going to see Chad and Marlena talking about Kate Roberts' death. And of course, death is in quotes because we don't know for sure if she's alive or not. On Monday's episode, Marlena is reading and relaxing when Chad Damaris shows up to see her alive and well for himself. He calls it a miracle. He wishes Kate was still alive too, though. Doc tells him that she heard a shot and thinks someone took out Kate Roberts, but she didn't see what happened. Then Chad talks about how this is bringing up his feels about losing Abigail Devereaux, but he said at least he knew what happened with Abby, and that made it easier on him. And Doc reminds him that they were kept knocked out most of the time in the lab. Then Chad says Megan claimed that Thomas Banks snatched Kayla. Doc's stunned. She says it's possible since he is an associate of Megan's, but she never saw Banks there. She doesn't know who else was there with Dr. Rolfe and Megan Hathaway, but knows there was one more person in the lab facilities, yet she doubts it's Thomas Banks because this mystery person was also frozen at one point while Thomas was running around making trouble. Chad's upset about Kate, but happy that she had Marlena and Kayla with her in her final hours. He goes to leave, but he's surprised to see Stephanie Johnson at the door. Now, we're going to backtrack because then there were scenes that came before this with Stephanie about Joey and other things. So, Days of Our Lives recap for Monday. At the beginning, we saw Stephanie Johnson getting an alarming phone call while she's with her brother, Trip Johnson. She says it's a hospital in Seattle and their brother, Joey Johnson, was in an accident. And it sounds like a bad one. Trip's concerned, but he is happy to hear that Joey only had a broken leg and a couple of cracked ribs. Stephanie says she needs to go see Joey in Seattle right now since her parents are out of town. But Trip insists he'll be the one to go to Seattle and care for their brother. He's certain that Wendy Shen will understand why he has to break their date since she has a brother too. Trip insists again and tells Stephanie to go see Marlena about this phone call. They hug, she goes, and that's where it picks up when she comes in at the house. Then Wendy comes in and sees that Trip has his bag packed. He's sorry to break their date and explains. Trip tells Wendy that Joey's in surgery and he wants to be there when his brother wakes up. She reassures him that he's doing the right thing on Days of Our Lives. He asks for a rain check on their date and she's happy to say yes and sends her best wishes to his brother. Then back at Marlena's, she hugs Stephanie, and Stephanie's surprised to see Chad there. He again calls Doc a miracle. Then she asks Marlena if she can hypnotize her to help recall every word of the phone conversation with her mom, Kayla, and she says Tripp suggested that she might be able to help. So Chad lingers while Marlena hypnotizes Steph. She recalls the static on the call, but she can't remember enough. Chad blames himself because at one point he kind of has this outburst and he feels like he interrupted the flow. But then all of a sudden, Stephanie remembers the name Victor Kiriakis, and that shocks everyone. Now, in Greece, we're going to see a brawl with best friends Steve and Beau. And this is a big part of our Days of Our Lives recap for Monday, April 10th. So Steve is grilling this Greek police officer and he tells him Shane Donovan is already there asking questions. So they send Patch to wait with Shane. We're putting Shane in quotes. He's stunned to see it's Beau Brady alive after all this time. But Beau looks annoyed. He avoids eye contact. And then when Steve hugs him, he's just very lackluster and he resists. Patch wants to know how it's possible and why he's posing as Shane. Beau says it's a long story, but Steve wants to hear it. He wants to know why he's there, asking about Rolfe and the prisms. But Beau lies and says he's undercover for the ISA. He tries to sidestep Steve, who gets very upset, And then Steve says, some psycho took my wife, Kayla, and he thinks it's Thomas Banks. He wants Beau to call Hope Brady and tell him that she's alive. But Beau grabs the phone away and he's mad. He comes clean that he's the one who kidnapped his sister but won't explain anymore. Steve demands to see Kayla. Beau reminds him he'd never hurt his own sister. Then things get really pissy between the guys. Steve is in a fit of rage and things turn physical. Beau tells him, get the hell off me, and he threatens him with a knife. Steve reminds him they're best friends, and Beau reminds him that he took his eye and he's ready to take the other one. But instead of stabbing him in the eye, he stabs the knife into the wall and pulls a gun out and pistol whips Steve unconscious. Then he drags a knocked out Steve into the lobby and threatens the cop, who hands the prisms over to him. He tells the cop that Patch is a con artist and he comes to babbling, but Beau drags him out, still staggering and mumbling. Also in Greece, now we flip over to Kayla Brady. She's locked in the wine cellar because Beau wanted to make sure she couldn't get out while he ran to get the prisms. She finds a letter to her mom, Carolyn Brady, that was marked return to sender. She's amazed that Victor Kiriakis kept this return letter after all these years. She finds some old reading glasses, then rips open the envelope to scan the letter that's been untouched for decades. She reads it out loud. Victor writes how painful it was to leave Carolyn behind in Salem. The letter goes on to say that his feelings for her are so strong and his desire for her was so strong, he left because he didn't want to have his feelings on display for all to see. And then Victor writes that he wanted to tell the world how much he loved her, but that made him a ticking time bomb. He left so he wouldn't blow up her life and hurt her family. Kayla just dissolves into tears reading this romance. Then Victor writes about daydreaming that they would have a child together. Obviously, this letter came before the revelation that Beau actually was his biological son. Victor goes on to write that he knows they can't marry and have a family, but he dreamt of a son with her. Then the letter invites her to Greece to his childhood home, that very home where Kayla is being held right now. Then Victor writes that they could be together there because he wants time with her. He says he wants Carolyn Brady as his wife. He knows it's impossible, but wants her to think about it. And then he ends the letter saying he's forever hers. Kayla's done reading and is in tears, but then she's stunned to see her husband being hauled into the room by Beau, who drops him on the floor and leaves them locked in. Kayla cradles Steve's face. He's so happy to see her, and she's peppering his face with kisses. It's all very sweet. Now to the big days of our lives. Cameo. If you saw the guy playing Constantine and wondered, why does he look so familiar? We're going to tell you exactly who it is, and it is such an exciting deal that they grabbed this guy for this little cameo. So Harris Michaels and Hope Brady are asking questions about Thomas Banks at a Greek tavern. The owner remembers Harris from a couple of years ago. He was there with Hope, and there was trouble. So take a really close look at the tavern owner, Constantine, and then think back to that epic 80s movie, The Breakfast Club. That's janitor Carl. He's done a ton of stuff since then, a lot of times playing Greek characters because John Capellas is Greek. He's Canadian, but Greek heritage. And it's just so cool to see him on there. And once you take a close look, you'll go, oh yeah, that's Carl the janitor. Of course, he's done other stuff, but for me personally, that's the most epic thing I remember him from. Constantine still thinks that Harris is a wanted man who escaped, and he wants to know if he's holding Hope against his will. He's got a baseball bat ready to bash Steve Burton's character in the head. But Hope talks him down and shows him an article that says Harris was cleared of all charges. Then Harris apologizes about his awful past, and Constantine insists that they have dinner there, although he didn't recognize Kayla, and he tells him he hasn't seen Thomas Banks in a very long time. They try to refuse dinner, but he insists. It turns out that that's where Harris and Hope met, at that same tavern more than a year ago. He gushes about them as this vibrant couple. He serves them dinner, and Harris says, well, let's eat, and then we'll get back to our search after dinner. But then Harris starts talking about when they were last there, he was under Megan's control, but he could still see that Hope was beautiful, and she turned every man's head in the tavern. Then music starts, and she's reminded of dancing on the table last time, although she tries to deny it. Dancers surround them, and one offers Hope his hand and won't take no for an answer. She joins in with the dance, and Harris watches them smiling. She breaks a couple of dishes and shouts, "Opa!" and then another and another. She dances the Sirtaki with them and finally drags Harris in with them as well. He cuddles her close, and their chemistry is sizzling. They have a very hot kiss while the dancers surround them. And that is everything that happened on Days of Our Lives on Monday, April 10th. If you haven't clicked subscribe, please do it now and come back all the time to our YouTube channel to check out all the latest Days of Our Lives spoilers and updates.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.